A couple of bombshell comments and quotes have recently dropped from Mike Norvell, and they're coming from a couple of recruits who are in this 2025 class. And I don't necessarily think that they're a super big surprise, but I do think that they speak to some of the character and the nature of how Mike Norvell views recruiting that fans need to understand that maybe they don't just yet. Mike Norvell has often said that this is a program that's not for everyone, and it's for the real ones. And that comment has frustrated fans at times. That comment has made fans kind of scratch their heads when we've had some signing day woes or some signing day frustrations over the last few years. But the more and more that I learn about Mike Norvell and the more and more that I see about him and his character, I think that we're learning about how real he truly is. Listen, Mike Norvell has preached and been consistent with the same message from the day that he got to Tallahassee until today. And though there were bumps and bruises along the way, and though everything wasn't always perfect, his consistency has never wavered once. He's preaching the same message today that he preached when he got here in December of 2019, and he's continued on that path. He told guys where we were headed. He told guys where we were going to, and a lot of that has come to pass. A lot of that has happened. Recently, in a conversation with Byron Lewis, Zach Blostein uncovered something pretty shocking that Coach Norvell had told him. He basically said, "What haven't they done?" He said, "I visited Coach Norvell when I was in the 8th grade. I think their record was like 4-8. He told me if I want to be the best, if I want to be elite, if I want to be successful, that that's the place to be. He told me that he was going to win with or without me. And shoot, he's winning without me. I want to be a part of that." You know what I'm saying? Mike Norvell coming out and telling a kid when they were not very good. At the time that he told him this, probably in the middle of that 2021 season. Now, they went 5-7, not 4-8. But Mike Norvell was 8-13 around the time that he told him this. There wasn't a lot of success in Tallahassee. There wasn't a lot of winning going on in Tallahassee. And he still told him, "Listen, I am going to be successful. We as a program are going to be successful. You can join us or you can watch us win." Now, that's not a new quote. That's not something that, oh my goodness, I can't believe Mike Norvell came up with that. But it was his belief. And what did Mike Norvell do since then? Well, he won 23 of 26 games. He went on a 19-game winning streak that culminated in an ACC championship, a 4-0 record against rivals over the last couple of years, 2 wins against LSU, a win against Clemson on the road in overtime, and more. Byron Lewis seemed pretty excited. I made a graphic and tweeted it yesterday, and he shared that graphic. And I think the Noles are in a really good spot to pick up his services, but it again spoke to what Coach Norvell's true message and honesty to some of these kids are. Contrast that or compare that with what he told Trell Jones just a couple of weeks ago. Again, in a conversation with Noles 247, Zach Blostein, which massive shout out there to Zach, who continues to get massive information and news like this. We talked about some of the conversations that he had with the staff. He mentioned that Florida State pretty much only wants him as their option at quarterback in 2025, saying that he fit their program the best, saying that he's the only quarterback that they want in the country. However, with him visiting Florida recently and entertaining some recruiting from them, if Trell was to take an official visit or anything like that, then they may have to get back in contact with other quarterbacks in this recruiting class. He said that Florida State stopped communicating with other QBs, and he really likes that, but he only gets one opportunity because he doesn't plan on entering the portal. He said, "Of course, I want to come compete. I want to start at Florida State. That's my goal. I'm not planning on doing this recruiting process again. I want to make my experience to the fullest." He said, "I don't really know if I'm taking an official to Florida yet. We're still talking about it and still thinking about it." But Florida State and Mike Norvell essentially laid down the hammer here and laid down the law. Trell Jones can take visits. We talked with James Coleman about that a couple of weeks ago. He can take visits. He can go anywhere he wants. It is absolutely his recruiting process. And if he thinks that that's what's best for him, he absolutely should do it. Now, do I think that it's what's best for him to go and visit a coach that's likely not even going to be there next year? Probably not. There's a lot of other things that go into these kids' decisions. And whatever Trell does is what's best for him. But Florida State, not necessarily playing games and letting kids know if you make certain decisions, if you visit, if you're a quarterback and you're not shut down like we want you to be, we may have to look at other options. Now, I hope Trell signs here. This is not some kind of oh man, if he visits, cut him loose or anything like that. I very much want him to. And James Coleman came on this very program and told you that he thinks Trell ends up in the Garnet and Gold as well. But I'm very happy that Mike Norvell and his staff are not backing off. They're not wavering. They're not necessarily letting kids dictate how things work. Again, this program is not for everyone. It's for the real ones. And as a quarterback, Florida State wants you locked in. And as a running back, Byron Lewis, Florida State wants to be real with you and wants to be honest with you. And many times in recruiting, that's not necessarily the case. I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I do want to give some love to our friends over at gotspears.com. They've got some really good deals running right now. We've told you about the Father's Day deal. If you haven't taken advantage of that yet, make sure you do. Code Father's Day 24 in the checkout will take $50 off of a bunch of different products, including their 6-foot spear with or without the torch, the large gator head with the tomahawk, which is one of my favorites, the 6-foot white tip spear or the 6-foot spear without the torch, if you need that in 14 business day rush shipping to get it in time for Father's Day. And then also the medium gator head with the tomahawk. They have a 4 to 6 week rush option available there. Right now, you can also get 2 spears for $200. It's a savings of $100. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to John again at gotspears.com. Appreciate John for his support. Now, again, recruiting kids in 2024 is very different. But Mike Norvell still has a little bit of that old school approach in him. He still believes in being honest with kids, and he still believes in being upfront with kids. And if you can't tell that from the 2 recruiting stories that dropped on Byron Lewis and Trell Jones, then I don't know what else to tell you. And in a day and age where certain coaches, we won't mention any names, but where certain coaches lie and mislead and absolutely negative recruit the heck out of other programs, not that negative recruiting doesn't happen everywhere, but when that is their MO, when that is what they go to because they can't point to success on the field. Again, we won't mention any names, but if you have any ideas or thoughts, maybe some pictures might just appear in your mind. When you don't have on-field success to be able to point to, you have to do that. You have to lead with causing doubt or trying to cast shade on what other programs are doing. And I don't think Norvell has to do that. You can even see it in some of the interviews that come out from kids. You can tell what the negative pieces of information that are being planted to some of these kids is. And I'm thankful that Norvell doesn't really have to do that. At times, do I wish that he'd get a little dirtier, a little bit more negative about other programs? Absolutely. But I don't think he feels like he needs to. I don't think he feels like he has to do what other coaches in this state and other places do. I think that results kind of speak for themselves a lot of times. And again, the program isn't for everyone. Like Norvell says, it's for the real ones. And again, that frustrates you, I understand at times, because of the way that certain things in recruiting have gone down. But honesty still wins a lot of the time. And being upfront with kids still wins a lot of the time. And in very different ways, Coach Norvell shows you his character and his personality by being honest with Byron Lewis, being honest with Trell Jones, and you better believe that he does the same thing with every other recruit. I've heard other stories that we can't necessarily even talk about on air of Coach Norvell being honest with kids and it almost being comical the way that he is, as opposed to trying to pressure them, as opposed to trying to convince them or coerce them into a decision that benefits him. I think ultimately the reason that you see Florida State have the retention that they do and do a good job with the superstars that they have, you don't have their best running back transferring to arch rival Georgia. You don't have their best wide receiver transferring to Georgia like Miami's kid did this year. You don't see that because of the honesty that Norvell puts forward when he's recruiting. Now, obviously, in recruiting, you need a great collective. You need an NIL that is very worthwhile, and we'll continue to sing the praises of the Battle's End. And I continue to give monthly there and encourage folks to monthly go and subscribe and support what their efforts are. If you're not doing that, I'd say to go get that done right now. But sometimes honesty just wins out. And in recruiting under Norvell, it seems like that's going to be his MO. You may not like it, but that's what they're going to do. So where's that leave us? Norvell's always going to recruit around the top 10. I think there could be years where you're slightly better and you get up closer to that top 5. I think there are going to be years where he's slightly worse and you're around 12, 13, somewhere in that range. I'm encouraged by this year. I think they're set up to be well within that top 10 again. I don't necessarily know that Mike Norvell is going to go out and compete for the number 1 recruiting class. That's not necessarily his goal. He's not going to pressure and lie to enough kids for that to happen. What I also know, though, is that he's going to develop guys better than any other coach in this state, and it's not going to be close. Development's a huge piece of what goes on. If you develop like Florida State does, the number 10 class is much closer to the number 4 class. And the number 3 class, like you had down there in South Florida, probably looks a little bit more like the number 12 or 13 class. Much like Jimbo a couple of years ago, you can have the best recruiting in the world, but if you can't get the most out of your players, Florida and Miami, it doesn't really matter. And then he's also going to be elite in the portal every single time. 247 came out with their rankings the other day, and it accompanies all factors into their ranking system, and they were one of only a couple of programs that got an A+ in the portal this cycle. They added a couple more pieces here just this week, and I don't know that they're done just yet. And so what does that leave you with? Well, if you've got about a top 10 recruiting class, if you develop better than most programs in the country, and then you bring in the best ready-made players ready to go today through the portal, you're looking at a top 5 roster in college football annually, just like they had last year, just like the NFL draft proved they had. People expecting this massive drop-off for Florida State in 2024 are going to be sorely disappointed. You'll notice that when you see how many games the Seminoles win this year, and you'll also notice that next April when the draft comes back around and they put another 7, 8, 9, or 10 guys into the NFL. The machine is built, and the way that Mike Norvell does it might be different than what you want, might be different than what you were expecting. But Florida State is set up in the way that they develop and the way they recruit and the way that they use the portal to be really, really successful. And I think the honesty of the way that Mike Norvell is building it is why there will be longevity. I think it's why it's different than what other programs are doing. And I understand that some of you guys want to win recruiting championships in the offseason because that's fun. That's 9 months worth of celebrating. But just remember, the actual goal of this sport is to win the 3 months in the fall. It's to win from September to November and then beyond. It's not to beat your chest over the way that you enjoy the offseason recruiting championships. What matters is still the results on the field. And Florida State had more wins last year than both of their rivals combined. They've had more wins last year than either of their rivals the last 2 years combined. And they're going to continue that this season. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate you guys listening to me rant. I'd love to talk about this down in the comments, but that's my thoughts for today on Mike Norvell, his honesty, and where we are in recruiting.